Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? Wow, we're halfway through the month of December now, and I wish I could show you what it's like outside, but it's too cold for me to be there, and there's snow coming down, not at a fast clip, but faster than just lightly falling. And it's still pretty dark out, even though it's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. I woke up today thinking about compassion, thinking about all of the people in the Christmas story who showed compassion in one way or another, and we don't even know half of them, I'm sure, right? Because only a small percentage of people are mentioned in the stories, really. And I'm just going to suspend any intellect here and suggest that we look at everything as being real as we've come to know it. Without scholarship. I know. I go back and forth. Maybe you do too. Oh, is this real? Is it not real? What does it mean? What doesn't it mean? What can it mean? I'm just going with pageant Christmas today. All right, so I'm thinking about all of the people in the Christmas story who have compassion. And beginning with Mary. And I have compassion for her. Can you imagine, being a teenager and getting that message and what it would mean for her in that culture? And oh my gosh, it was just, I have a lot of compassion for that. I have compassion for Joseph, who had compassion for Mary, right? He could have, life could have gone very differently for Mary had Joseph not believed the angels and said, okay, he'd marry Mary. Thinking about those who may have engaged Mary and Joseph when she was pregnant and having compassion for her, and certainly whoever owned the stable or where she ended up giving birth, they must have had compassion. I like to think that the community had compassion, and perhaps there were some attendants to her, maybe some midwives, or a midwife, or the mother, the wife of the innkeeper, or. But isn't that interesting? We always think that the innkeeper was a man, and had a wife. What if it was one of the rare cases where, a woman had owned land, owned her business, or took people into her own home, and that became the inn? Probably not likely, but always possible. So, anyway, I'm thinking about compassion. And I have been reading for probably 20 or 30 years the writings of a person who talks about the purpose of our life here is to increase the compassion quotient of the planet. That everything that happens is designed to increase the compassion quotient of the planet, so that when we do that, the vibrational level, the collective vibrational level of the planet, moves to a higher state of enlightenment, when we can become compassionate and let that compassion rule our lives. I don't know, this season seems to be particularly attuned to that, I think. Anyway, then, lo and behold, another one of my daily meditations this morning talked about compassion. And it said, I think this was from the Daily Om, but I'm not sure, said, true compassion recognizes that all the boundaries we perceive between ourselves and others are an illusion. Let me read that again. True compassion recognizes that all the boundaries we perceive between ourselves and others are an illusion. All the boundaries. Now, there are healthy boundaries that we should all have about actions, for instance, or what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, both professionally and personally. But we're not talking about those boundaries. I think she or he is talking here about the distances, the separation that we feel from others on a spiritual essence level. And then it goes on to say the practice of compassion becomes more difficult when we find ourselves unable to understand the actions of the person who offends us. I think that's true, don't you? We spend an incredible amount of time trying to figure out why so-and-so does whatever he or she does, whether it's someone we personally know or just someone we observe in the news. Practice of compassion becomes more difficult when we find ourselves unable to understand the actions of the person who offends us. These are the situations that ask us to look more deeply into ourselves, into parts of our own psyches that we may want to deny, parts that we have repressed because society has labeled them bad or wrong. Let me read that again. When we, these, meaning these situations where we can't understand the actions of someone else, these are the situations that ask us to look more deeply into ourselves. If I don't understand someone, I have to look more deeply into myself, it's saying, into parts of our psyches that we may want to deny. In other words, maybe that person is bothering me because it's triggering something or aligning with something inside me that I would prefer to deny. Parts that we have repressed because society has labeled them bad or wrong. So if I'm bothered by someone who's violent and I can't get to the point of recognizing that there is no barrier between us so that I could have compassion for that person, then I need to look at myself and say, why can't I get past that barrier? It's an uncomfortable thing, isn't it? Why can't I get past a barrier of recognizing the oneness of creation or how I am connected to others? I think Jesus, tried to get us to do that. I mean, one example comes to mind, why look at the speck in your brother's eye before taking out the log from your own? The whole adage of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, or let the person who is without guilt cast the first stone. We have to get past our own issues all the time. They're what hold us back when we are supposed to have compassion and feel the oneness with everyone and everything around us. Why should we have to do that? Well, because that's what elevates us spiritually. That puts us more in the Godhead, the God sense to our being. That's what helps us to get in touch with the essence of the Creator within us that is present within each one of us. And so I'm not going to tell you I do it all the time. I'm lucky if I can do it once a day. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe I try to do it more than that. But you get what I mean. I mean, it's. I think we are brought up in, at least I was in my culture, to respect myself and my differentiation from others. And differentiating from others is an important thing for us to do to become self-sustaining, self-aware. But we have to be careful and temper that with an understanding that while we're becoming self-actualized, we are also connected to everyone else and everything else. And I think that's probably a struggle that many of us go through for most of our lives, trying to balance those things. Maybe one of the places we can start having compassion is with ourselves, trying to do that, because that's no mean feat. Trying to balance how I am self-actualized and this fully complete human being with personal agency, and at the same time I am connected. And yet I believe that if we can become fully self-actualized, it will be easier to see our connectedness to others who are fully self-actualized. So what do you do when you have someone who's not fully self-actualized? Well, maybe that's where we have compassion, and we recognize that we are still connected to them no matter what, and that the boundaries are not there spiritually. We all have the same spark of the divine inside us, and we are all children of God. Just a thought. Thanks for joining me on this wintry morning for this prayerful pause with the pastor when we think of something greater than ourselves. I'm not sure where to take this today. Maybe it's just an awareness. Maybe it's not thinking. Maybe it's just looking at things with a different awareness of how we are connected and trying to live, expand the compassion quotient in my own sphere and in the sphere of the planet. I'm Pastor Deb Swift with South Presbyterian Church in Rochester, New York, and I thank you for joining me for this time. We'll see you next time. And until then, be safe, please. Yes, the vaccine is out there now, and we give thanks for that. But let's be real and not foolhardy. It's not going to be fully in effect until, I would say, a year from now, or maybe the end of the third quarter in 2021. So be safe. Take care. God bless. See you next time. Bye for now.